"You're not family," the fiancé told the maid's toddler. Then the billionaire heard it all. The grand hallway of a Manhattan penthouse. A tiny girl, just 3 years old, stands barefoot on cold marble floors. Her eyes are dry. Her voice is steady. And what she says next stops everyone cold. "You made my mama cry again. My mama never cry for herself. She only cry when nobody's looking. See her. I always see her. And God sees you too." The fiancé froze. The crystal glass in her hand trembled. The billionaire stood at the top of the staircase. Completely still. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because a 3-year-old girl had just said what no adult in that mansion had the courage to say out loud. And nothing in that house would ever be the same again. Welcome back to Heartfelt Stories, the channel where real emotions meet real lessons, and ordinary people do extraordinary things. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now because we tell stories that will move you, shake you, and change the way you see the world. Before we begin, drop a comment right now and tell us, which country are you watching from? We read every single one. Today's story is about pain that was swallowed in silence. It's about a little girl who saw what grown adults refused to see. It's an emotional journey through humiliation, love, courage, and a twist so powerful, it will leave you speechless. There are lessons in this story that money cannot buy. And there is a moment coming, somewhere between Section 3 and Section 4, that will make you stop and ask yourself, what kind of person am I, really? Stay with us. This one is going to hit deep. Some people wear their cruelty like perfume. Expensive, suffocating, impossible to ignore. Have you ever watched someone you love be disrespected, and felt completely powerless? Tell us in the comments. Her name was Rosa. Rosa Menendez was 34 years old, 5'3", and had hands that told stories her mouth never would. Calloused palms. Cracked knuckles. Fingers that moved from task to task with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned long ago that rest was a luxury she could not afford. She had come to New York from San Antonio 7 years ago with nothing but a single suitcase, a worn Bible tucked under her arm, and a determination so fierce it could have cut glass. She had found work. She had found a small apartment in Queens. 2 rooms, 1 window that faced a brick wall, and a radiator that clanked like an old argument every winter night. She had built something small and steady and honest. And then, 3 years ago, she had found something she never planned on, a little girl named Lily. Lily Menendez came into the world on a Tuesday morning in March, during a thunderstorm so loud the hospital windows rattled. The nurses said she didn't cry when she was born. She just opened her eyes, big, dark, serious eyes, and looked around the room like she was already taking inventory of everything that needed to be fixed. From the moment Lily could walk, she followed Rosa everywhere. Not out of clinginess, but out of curiosity. She watched the way her mother mopped floors on her knees. She watched the way Rosa smiled at people who never smiled back. She watched the way her mother folded other people's laundry with care, smoothing every crease with her palm, treating every garment like it mattered, even when no one was watching. "Why you do it so careful, Mama?" Lily asked once, standing on her tiptoes to see over the laundry basket. "Nobody sees." Rosa looked down at her daughter and smiled. "God sees, baby. And you see. That's enough." Lily stored that answer somewhere deep inside herself. She was 3 years old, but she already understood that the way you do small things says everything about who you are. The job at the Whitmore penthouse had come through an agency 14 months ago. It paid better than anything Rosa had ever earned. The address was on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, a building so tall and glass and steel magnificent that the first time Rosa stood in front of it, she had to tilt her head all the way back just to find the sky. She had pressed her hand to her chest, taken one breath, and walked inside. The man of the house was Ethan Whitmore, 32 years old, self-made billionaire, tech industry. His name appeared in Forbes and on the covers of business magazines with headlines like "The Quiet Giant," and the man who rewired Silicon Valley. In person, he was different from what Rosa expected. He was tall but not imposing, quiet but not cold. He said please and thank you. He left her a handwritten note on her first day that said, "This home runs because of people like you. Thank you." Rosa had read that note 4 times and then folded it neatly and put it in her pocket. She had thought, this will be a good place. She had been wrong. Not about Ethan. About what Ethan was about to bring into that house. Her name was Veronica Dale. 29 years old. Connecticut old money. The kind of wealth that is inherited, not earned, and wears itself differently. Slender and polished, with honey blonde hair and a smile she used like a scalpel. Precise, surgical, designed to cut without appearing to. She had been Ethan's fiancée for 6 months when Rosa started working there. And from the very first morning, Rosa understood with absolute clarity that Veronica saw her the same way she saw the furniture. Useful. Replaceable. Below acknowledgement. She never said good morning. She never said please. She left rings on the marble countertops and watched Rosa clean them without blinking. She sent back coffee 3 times in one morning. Too hot, too cold, too much milk. And when Rosa apologized the 3rd time, Veronica looked at her the way you look at a smudge on a mirror. Like it was offensive simply by existing. Rosa said nothing. She learned the rhythms of Veronica's moods the way sailors learn weather. Watching the small signs, adjusting course, staying out of the storm. But Lily was different. The agency technically did not allow children in the workplace. But Ethan had quietly made an exception when he learned Rosa had no childcare on Thursdays. He had simply said, "Bring her. It's fine." Veronica had not been home that first Thursday. By the second Thursday she was. She walked into the kitchen and found Lily sitting on the floor near the breakfast island, coloring in a paper notebook Rosa had brought to keep her occupied. Lily was drawing a house. With a garden. And a sun with a face. Veronica looked at the child the way you look at something that has appeared in a place it should not be. "What is that doing in here?" she said. "Not who. No she. Rosa turned from the sink. "I'm sorry, Miss Dale. She's very quiet. She won't cause any trouble." "I'm not asking about trouble," Veronica said, her voice smooth and precise as a blade. "I'm asking why a staff member's child is sitting on my kitchen floor." Lily looked up from her drawing. She looked at Veronica. She looked at her mother. And she said nothing. But she watched everything. Rosa quickly packed Lily's things and moved her to the small laundry room off the hallway. A windowless space with humming machines and the smell of fabric softener, and set her up there instead. She did not say anything to Veronica. She did not cry until she was alone. But Lily had seen her mother's face in that moment. The way it folded inward. The way dignity quietly retreated behind professional calm. She was 3 years old. But she understood more than anyone in that house could imagine. And she was paying attention to everything. Cruelty practiced daily stops feeling like cruelty to the person performing it. But it never stops feeling like cruelty to the person receiving it. Have you ever stayed silent when someone disrespected you, just to protect something you needed? How did that feel? The weeks passed. October became November. The Manhattan air turned sharp and cold, and the Whitmore penthouse shifted into what Veronica called holiday preparation mode, which meant fresh flower arrangements every 3 days, a caterer scheduled for Thanksgiving, and a social calendar so packed it required its own spreadsheet. It also meant more hours for Rosa, more tasks, more invisible labor performed in the background of a life she was not part of. Rosa woke at 5:30 every morning. She dropped Lily at her neighbor Mrs. Patterson's apartment, a 70-year-old retired schoolteacher who adored the little girl and called her "my Thursday treasure" on the days Rosa couldn't bring her, and rode 2 subway lines uptown. She arrived at the penthouse by 7. She left when things were busy, close to 8 at night. She cleaned. She organized. She prepared things. She restored order to rooms that were disordered by people who had never once in their lives had to restore order themselves. And through it all, Veronica Dale moved through the penthouse like weather, unpredictable, powerful, and completely indifferent to what she left behind. The cruelties were never large. That was the particular sophistication of them. They were small and precise, and always wrapped in something that could be mistaken for reasonableness if you weren't paying close enough attention. Veronica would leave a glass of red wine on the edge of a white marble surface and then note, archly when it left a ring, that good staff prevents these things from happening. She would call Rosa by the wrong name. Maria, isn't it? And when Rosa gently corrected her, Veronica would say, right, of course, with a smile that made it clear she didn't consider the distinction important enough to retain. She would describe Rosa to her friends, on speakerphone in rooms she knew Rosa was working in, as our girl. A phrase that managed to be both possessive and diminishing at the same time. One Tuesday morning, Veronica's college friend Brittany was visiting. They sat at the kitchen island drinking green juice and talking about a charity gala. Rosa moved quietly around them, cleaning the stovetop. You should see what I have to deal with, Veronica said, gesturing vaguely in Rosa's direction without looking at her. Help is so hard to find these days. You basically have to accept whatever walks through the door. Rosa's hand stopped moving for exactly 1 second. Then it continued. Brittany glanced at Rosa, a brief, slightly uncomfortable glance, and then looked back at her juice. Rosa finished cleaning the stovetop. She moved to the next task. She did not look up. But Lily was there that day. It was a Thursday, and Mrs. Patterson had a doctor's appointment. So Rosa had brought her daughter. Lily was in the laundry room with her coloring book. But the laundry room door was open 6 inches. And the kitchen was not far. Lily had heard everything. She came to the kitchen doorway, a tiny figure in a yellow dress, bare feet on the cold floor, and stood there looking at the 2 women at the island. Veronica noticed her and stiffened slightly, the way you stiffen when something unexpected appears in your peripheral vision. What do you want? Veronica said. Lily didn't answer immediately. She looked at her mother's back, still bent over the counter, still working, and then she looked at Veronica. She tilted her head to one side, the way children do when they are genuinely puzzled. Then she said, quietly but clearly, My mama is a person. The kitchen went completely silent. Brittany blinked. Veronica's expression moved through several things very quickly. Surprise, irritation, something that might have been a flicker of shame, before settling on a thin, dismissive smile. How adorable, she said to Brittany, as if the child had done a little trick. Rosa had turned around. Her face was carefully controlled. Come here, Lilybug, she said, her voice steady. Come back to the laundry room. Lily looked at her mother. She walked to her. But at the doorway, she turned back and looked at Veronica one more time, long and level and absolutely serious, before disappearing through the door. Brittany said nothing for a moment. Then carefully, She's a lot for a 3-year-old. Veronica set down her juice. She's the maid's kid, she said, as if that explained and concluded everything. Later that week, Ethan came home early from a business trip. He was not supposed to be back until Friday. A meeting had collapsed. Flight had opened up. He came through the front door at 4 in the afternoon, dropped his carry-on in the entryway, and stood for a moment in the quiet of his own home. He heard Veronica's voice from the living room. He heard another voice, higher, lighter, a child's voice, and frowned slightly, curious. He walked quietly down the hall. Veronica was on the phone. She hadn't heard him come in. She was standing near the window in the living room, looking out at the park, talking to someone. He thought it might be her mother. It's just getting ridiculous, she was saying, her voice carrying the particular tone of someone in the middle of a satisfying complaint. Ethan won't say anything, obviously, because he thinks he's being generous. But I am not running a daycare. I did not sign up to share my home with some maid's child every week. It's unprofessional and frankly it's beneath us. I'm going to talk to the agency. The woman is fine at her job but the child needs to go, And if Rosa can't arrange childcare, then maybe Rosa needs to go too. Ethan stood in the hallway. He did not move. He had heard similar things from Veronica before, or hints of them. He had noticed the slight edge in her voice when she spoke to or about Rosa. He had noticed things he had allowed himself to explain away because it was easier, because he was busy, because Veronica was beautiful and sharp, and he had told himself he loved her and that love meant extending good faith. Standing in that hallway, he felt something shift. He stepped back. He walked to the kitchen. Rosa was there, preparing dinner, with Lily sitting on the floor nearby, carefully arranging a set of toy animals in a very specific order. "Rosa," he said quietly. She looked up. "Mr. Whitmore. I didn't know you were back early. I'll get started on." "Don't worry about dinner," he said. "Take the rest of the afternoon. Take Lily home." Rosa studied his face. She had worked for enough people to know when something had changed in a room. "Is everything all right, sir?" He looked at Lily, who was looking up at him with those serious dark eyes. "Yeah," he said. Then more honestly, "I'm not sure." Lily held out one of her plastic animals. A small elephant. She held it up toward him with a steady little hand. He looked at it. He looked at her. And then, despite everything in his head, he reached down and took it. "Thank you," he said. Lily nodded once, very seriously, as if they had just made an agreement. Rosa gathered her things. She bundled Lily into her coat. At the door, Lily looked back at Ethan one more time, that same long, clear, measuring look. Then she walked out with her mother into the cold New York afternoon. The truth doesn't need to knock loudly. Sometimes it walks in on tiny bare feet. If you knew someone close to you was being cruel to someone who couldn't fight back, would you confront them? Or would you stay silent to keep the peace? December arrived, and the penthouse was transformed. Veronica had hired a decorator to string the kind of Christmas garlands and wreaths that appeared in architectural magazines. The ones so perfect they looked artificial even when they were real. The fireplace in the main living room was flanked by 7-foot noble fir trees, dressed in champagne and gold. Scented candles burned in every room. It looked, Rosa thought, exactly like a home that was performing the idea of warmth without actually containing any. Veronica was planning a Christmas Eve dinner party for 32 guests. The preparation alone had been consuming Rosa for 2 weeks. The polishing, the organizing, the shopping lists, the table settings, the detailed instruction sheets Veronica left in her slanted handwriting, underlined in places, with notations like, "These glasses face this direction," and "The centerpiece cannot be crooked this time." Rosa did everything. She did it correctly. She did it with the care she brought to every task, whether anyone noticed or not. Lily was there the Thursday 2 weeks before Christmas. Mrs. Patterson was visiting her daughter in Philadelphia for the week. Lily sat in the laundry room with a picture book, her feet tucked under her, perfectly content. The incident happened in the afternoon. Veronica had 2 friends over, women named Chelsea and Morgan, both of them sharp-edged and expensively dressed, the kind of women who laughed at the right moments and said nothing that wasn't calculated. They were sitting in the living room doing what Veronica called a gift curation session, reviewing the Christmas gifts Veronica intended to give and receive, making sure the selection projected the right image. Rosa moved through the room quietly, collecting cups, straightening cushions. "What are you giving Ethan this year?" Chelsea asked. Veronica smiled, the particular smile she wore when she knew the answer would impress. "I commissioned a piece. A sculptor in Brooklyn. It's a portrait bust of the 2 of us." She paused for effect. "In marble." "Oh my God, that's iconic," Morgan said. "I know. We're becoming a brand." Veronica laughed, lightly, but with absolute seriousness underneath. Rosa reached for an empty cup near the edge of the coffee table. As she did, she accidentally nudged a small decorative dish, one of Veronica's collection of antique porcelain pieces, and it slid 2 inches to the left. It didn't fall. It didn't break. moved 2 inches. Veronica's head turned like a compass finding north. Rosa. Her voice was controlled. Quiet. The quieter Veronica was, Rosa had learned, the more dangerous. I'm so sorry, Miss Dale, it didn't. That is a 19th century Limoges piece. It is not a coaster. It is not something you move around while you're grabbing cups. It cost more than you make in 6 months. Rosa absorbed this. I understand. I'm sorry. Do you? Because this is not the first time you've been careless with things in this house. And I want to be very clear. Veronica's voice was still controlled, but she had leaned forward now, and Chelsea and Morgan had gone very still in the way bystanders go still when they sense something escalating and don't want to be caught in it. This home contains irreplaceable things. And if you cannot be trusted around irreplaceable things, then we need to have a very different conversation. Rosa said nothing. She stood with the cups in her hands and she received it, all of it, the words and the tone and the implication, and she kept her face very, very still. She did not hear the small footsteps in the hallway. But Veronica did. They all turned. Lily stood in the living room doorway, in her little yellow dress, the picture book still in her hand, her dark eyes moving from her mother to Veronica to the 2 women on the sofa and back again. Go back to the laundry room, Lilybug, Rosa said immediately. Her voice was gentle but urgent. Lily didn't move. She looked at Veronica. And then she said, in that clear, quiet 3-year-old voice that somehow carried with absolute precision through the elegant, gold-lit room. Why do you always make my mama feel small? Nobody spoke. Veronica's expression went through something complicated. Lily continued, as if explaining something obvious. My mama does everything right. She does everything you say. She never says mean words. Oz. You say mean words all the time. My mama says that how you talk to people shows who you are inside. Another pause. Her eyes were completely steady. What are you inside? Chelsea made a very small sound that might have been a smothered laugh or a smothered gasp. Impossible to tell which. Veronica stood up. She crossed the room in 4 steps and crouched down to Lily's level. Gracefully, controlled. And she looked at the child with a particular smile she used when she wanted to appear warm for an audience. Sweetheart, she said, in a voice coated with condescension so thick you could have spread it on bread. This is a grown-up conversation. Little girls who aren't part of this family need to go back where they belong. Rosa started to move forward. Lily. But Lily didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She looked directly at Veronica from a distance of about 18 inches and said, with complete calm, You're not kind to my mama. And you're not kind to me. My mama says unkind people are usually just sad. Are you sad? The silence in that room was absolute. Veronica stood up slowly. Something had moved across her face that was very hard to read. Something that, for just 1 fraction of a second, looked less like anger and more like being suddenly, unexpectedly seen. Then it closed. And what replaced it was ice. Rosa, she said, her voice very quiet. Get your daughter. Get your things. And when you come in tomorrow, we're going to talk about your continued employment here. Rosa's face did not change. She walked to Lily. She picked her up, all 32 pounds of her, warm and small and completely unafraid. She held her daughter against her chest. And she walked out of the room. She did not look back. She didn't have to. Because neither of them knew, and Veronica certainly didn't know, that a set of footsteps had stopped in the hallway just outside the living room approximately 45 seconds earlier. Ethan Whitmore had come home. He had been standing in the hallway. He had heard every single word. What would you do if you were in his place right now? If you had just heard the woman you planned to marry speak to a 3-year-old child that way, and you had been making excuses for her for months, what would you do? Tell us in the comments. 'Cause what Ethan did next, nobody saw coming. Some moments don't ask you who you want to be. They simply reveal who you already are. Have you ever had a single moment that made you realize a relationship was wrong? not because of a big dramatic event, but because of something small and true. Tell us. He stood in the hallway for a long moment after Rosa and Lily disappeared toward the front door. He stood there and he did not move. Inside the living room, he could hear Veronica recovering, the sound of controlled breathing, the shift back into social mode, Chelsea and Morgan murmuring something diplomatic and carefully uncommitted. The sounds of people resetting, moving on, deciding collectively that the thing that had just happened was going to be categorized as an inconvenience and filed away. Ethan had been filing things away for months. He understood this now with a clarity that was almost physical. He had been doing what people do when they have invested themselves in something, in a person, in a version of the future, and started to see warning signs they don't want to see. He had been editing, softening the edges of things he witnessed, telling himself that Veronica was demanding, not cruel, that she was particular, not dismissive, that her way of treating people in service roles was a product of how she was raised, not a reflection of who she was. He had heard her on the phone 3 weeks ago. He had processed that too and told himself he would address it. He had not addressed it. He was 32 years old. He had built a company from nothing. He had made decisions worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He had negotiated with governments and restructured industries and stared down market crashes without blinking. And he had been completely unable to say to the woman he was engaged to marry, "The way you treat people who work for us is not acceptable," because saying it meant confronting the full shape of what he had been excusing. And once you see the full shape of something, you cannot unsee it. A 3-year-old girl had just walked into his living room and seen it immediately. She had named it without flinching. She had looked at a woman who wielded social power like a weapon and asked, in a voice made of nothing but honesty, "What are you inside?" He heard the front door close. Rosa and Lily were gone. He stepped into the living room. Veronica saw him, and her expression shifted immediately into something that blended relief and controlled frustration. "Ethan, good you're home. I need to talk to you about Rosa. What happened today was completely—" "I heard it," he said. He stopped. "I heard everything," he said. "I came in through the kitchen. I was standing in the hallway." Chelsea and Morgan exchanged a glance and performed a simultaneous, seamless disappearance. Suddenly both of them were very interested in gathering their things, saying something brief and unintelligible, and making their way to the front door with the practiced grace of people who have learned that the fastest path out of someone else's conflict is a quiet exit. The door clicked shut behind them. Ethan and Veronica stood on opposite sides of the living room, surrounded by 7-foot Christmas trees and champagne garlands and the smell of expensive candles, and looked at each other. "She started it," Veronica said, and then seemed to realize as the words came out that they were not the words she wanted, and straightened and recalibrated. "The child is completely undisciplined, Ethan. She walked into the middle of a private conversation and spoke to me in a way that was. She's 3 years old, Veronica. She spoke to me like that because her mother raised her to have no concept of appropriate. She asked you why you make her mother feel small." His voice was very quiet. "That's not a lack of appropriate concept. That's a child who notices things. She notices because she sees it happen." He paused. "Regularly." Veronica's chin came up. "I beg your pardon. You told Rosa a piece of porcelain costs more than she makes in 6 months. In front of your friends. Because a dish moved 2 inches. That dish is worth. I don't care what the dish is worth." His voice was still quiet, still completely calm. That, Veronica would later tell someone, was the most frightening thing. Not that he was angry, that he was clear. "I care that there is a woman who works in this home with dignity and with excellence, and the way you speak to her, the way you have spoken to her for 14 months, is a way I would not speak to anyone. And I should have said something 14 months ago. I should have said something 3 weeks ago when I heard you on the phone. I'm saying it now." Veronica's eyes changed. Something behind them moved, something that looked surprisingly less like fury and more like fear. You're being dramatic. You didn't see the full context. I heard her daughter say, "You made my mama cry again. My mama only cries when nobody's looking." He stopped. That's not context. I misunderstood. The silence stretched. What does this mean? Veronica said finally. Her voice, for the first time, had lost its smoothness. Something underneath it was exposed. It means, Ethan said, that I owe Rosa an apology. It means this has to change completely and permanently. And it means... He looked at the ring on her finger, the ring he had chosen, the ring he had been proud of, that I need to think very carefully about who I'm building a life with. Veronica took one sharp breath. You cannot be serious. Over a maid. Over a woman, he said. And a little girl. And what I am when I allow the people around me to treat them this way. He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. He looked one more time at the perfectly decorated room, the trees and the garlands and the everything in its place perfection that had always felt. He understood now, less like a home and more like a performance. I'm going to get some air, he said. We'll talk more when I'm back. He walked out. In the lobby of the building, he pulled out his phone. He found Rosa's number, the professional contact she had given the house account. He stared at it for a moment. Then he called. It rang 4 times. Then, Mr. Whitmore. Her voice was carefully neutral, the voice of someone who is managing something. Rosa, he said. I owe you an apology. I owe you more than that. But I'll start there. I heard. Today and other days. And I'm sorry I let it go on as long as it did. That's my responsibility. A long silence on the other end. Then very softly. Thank you, sir. Is Lily all right? Another pause. He heard, faintly in the background, a small voice asking something. Lily's voice, the particular high serious voice he recognized, and then Rosa saying quietly, It's okay, baby, it's okay. She's fine, Rosa said. She's Lily. She's always fine. Ethan stood on the sidewalk on the Upper East Side, in the December cold, with yellow cabs passing and holiday lights in the shop windows, and something that had been tight in his chest for a long time quietly released. I'd like you to come in tomorrow, he said. If you're willing. All right, Rosa said. And bring Lily, he said. Please. Justice doesn't always arrive with sirens and fanfare. Sometimes it arrives quietly, with a small child's hand in yours. What does it mean to you to truly see someone? Not their job title, not their usefulness to you, but to actually see them as a full human being. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Rosa barely slept that night. She lay in the small queen's apartment, on the other side of the thin wall from where Lily was sleeping. She could hear the soft, even rhythm of her daughter's breathing, the most reassuring sound in the world. And she stared at the ceiling and thought about 14 months of small cruelties, and one phone call that had said I see it, and I'm sorry, and she didn't know what to do with that. She was 34 years old and she had been told in various ways, by various people and circumstances, that she was less than, less important, less worthy of consideration. She had built a life in spite of that, not in the rubble of it, but around it, carrying it with her the way you carry something heavy for so long that your muscles simply adjust and you forget you're carrying it at all. Lily had never adjusted. That was the thing about Lily. She hadn't yet learned to carry it. She hadn't yet learned to look at unfair things and file them away under that's just how it is. She simply saw what was there and said what was true, because she was 3 years old and she didn't yet know she wasn't supposed to. Rosa reached over and turned off her bedside lamp and lay in the dark and thought about her daughter's voice saying, Why do you always make my mama feel small? She thought, I am not going to cry. She cried. Not for long. Not dramatically. Just quietly in the dark, alone the way she always was alone. And then she stopped and wiped her face with the back of her hand, and she thought about the morning. She arrived at the penthouse at 7 as always. Lily was with her, a small figure in a red wool coat, carrying a stuffed rabbit named Roger, completely unperturbed by any of the events of the day before in the philosophical way of 3-year-olds, who process difficulty and then release it with a wholeness adults spend lifetimes trying to relearn. Ethan was in the kitchen. This was unusual. He was not typically there at 7. He was standing at the counter with 2 cups of coffee, and he turned when they came in and looked at Rosa with an expression she could not entirely read. Veronica was not there. Rosa registered this. Said nothing about it. "Good morning," Ethan said. He looked at Lily. "Good morning." Lily looked at him. "Good morning," she said. Then, "Did you bring Roger back?" She was referring to the toy elephant from weeks ago. He had apparently kept it. He blinked. Then he went to a drawer and retrieved the small plastic elephant and held it out. Lily took it back, compared it briefly to Roger, seemed satisfied with the reunion, and proceeded to sit on the kitchen floor with both animals and begin what appeared to be a very serious conversation between them. Rosa watched this. Then she looked at Ethan. "She remembered," he said. "She remembers everything," Rosa said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Veronica is staying with a friend for a few days. While we sort things out." He said it carefully without drama. "I wanted you to know that you are not in any danger of losing this job. Not because of yesterday, not because of anything. You're valued here. You have been since day one. I should have made sure you felt that. I didn't. I'm sorry." Rosa looked at her coffee cup. She looked at her daughter on the floor. She looked at this man who had just said "I'm sorry" 2 days in a row, which was more than she had heard from anyone in authority in a very long time. She said, "Thank you." He said, "It's not enough. But I'm going to try to make it more adequate." What followed in the next weeks was a quiet transformation. Ethan sat down with Rosa, properly at the kitchen table, and talked through her hours, her schedule, Lily's presence in the house. He formalized an arrangement. Lily was welcome on Thursdays and any day Rosa needed her there. He had a small reading corner set up in the sunroom, a little chair, a basket of books, a soft rug in yellow and red. He simply did it. He did not make a production of it. He also ended his engagement to Veronica Dale. This too he did without drama. He had a long conversation with her that went, by his account, better and worse than expected in different parts. Veronica was not, at her core, a person without conscience. He believed that. She was, however, a person who had never had that conscience tested against the weight of someone else's dignity, and she had failed that test in ways neither of them could paper over. She took it, ultimately, with more grace than he expected. There was a version of Veronica underneath the polish and the precision. He had caught glimpses of it sometimes in unguarded moments, that was smaller and more uncertain than she ever let anyone see. He hoped she would find that version of herself and let it lead for a while. He told her that, gently. She looked at him for a long time and didn't say anything. He chose to believe she'd heard it. Christmas Eve arrived. There was no dinner party. Instead, Ethan had quietly arranged something different. He had asked Rosa if she would be willing to stay for the evening, not to work, but simply to be there. He had called Mrs. Patterson and personally invited her as well, which made the 70-year-old woman laugh in surprised delight. They had dinner together in the kitchen, not the formal dining room, the kitchen, because Lily had decided the kitchen was better. There were 4 of them, and a small plastic elephant and a rabbit named Roger who occupied a section of the table. They had roast chicken and mashed potatoes and store-bought pie, which Lily declared the best food in the whole world, a judgment she issued with the authority of someone who fully meant it. After dinner, Lily climbed into the chair next to Ethan with a serious, deliberate effort of a person 1/4 his size negotiating significant altitude, and then sat next to him and looked at the little Christmas tree he had set up on the kitchen counter. Small, undecorated except for a string of plain white lights. "It needs something," Lily said. "What does it need?" She considered. "Stars," she said. "Every tree needs stars." He looked at her. He looked at Rosa, who was watching from across the table with an expression that contained multitudes, exhaustion and love, and something that was moving through grief and emerging, slowly, into something that might eventually become peace. "Then tomorrow," he said, "we'll get stars." Lily nodded. This was satisfactory. Then she leaned against his arm, just slightly, the way small children lean, with total unself-conscious trust, and she looked at the little tree with its plain white lights, and she said nothing more, because nothing more needed to be said. Rosa looked at her daughter in that moment. Her little girl who had walked into a room full of cruelty with nothing in her hands but honesty. Her little girl who hadn't asked for power or protection. She had simply refused to pretend that wrong was right. She had seen clearly and spoken truthfully and stood steady, and the world, in some small but real way, had shifted around her. Rosa pressed her hand flat on the table and breathed. Mrs. Patterson reached across and covered Rosa's hand with her own. And there, in a kitchen on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, in the warm light of a small unfinished Christmas tree, sat 4 people who had found each other through an unlikely chain of ordinary moments. A phone call, a conversation, a little girl's question. "What are you inside?" The question was still out there in the world. Still looking for answers. But here, tonight, in this kitchen, the answer was clear. The most powerful force in any room is not money. It is not status. It is not the ability to make someone feel small. The most powerful force in any room is a person, of any age, of any size, who refuses to look away from the truth. Lily was 3 years old. She had no power by the world's definition. She had no name that opened doors, no wealth that commanded respect. But she had something that cannot be bought and cannot be performed. She saw people. She saw her mother when the world looked past her. She saw cruelty when the room decided to call it something else. She saw a man who had stopped seeing clearly, and she handed him a toy elephant, and she waited. That is all any of us can do. See the people in front of us. Name the things that are real. Be honest when it costs something. The rest has a way of working itself out. If this story reached something in you today, if it reminded you to see someone you might have been looking past, or gave you courage to say a true thing in a quiet moment, then it did what we hoped it would do. Please hit that like button. It takes 1 second and it means the world to us. Subscribe if you haven't already. We put our whole hearts into every story on this channel, and we would love for you to be part of this community. Leave a comment. Tell us your favorite moment. Tell us what Lily's words made you feel. Tell us which country you're watching from. We read every single one, and we are grateful for everyone. And share this story with a friend, a family member, someone who needs to hear that small people can do enormous things. That honesty is not weakness. That a 3-year-old girl once walked into a marble penthouse and changed everything, simply by refusing to pretend. Thank you for watching. Until next time, be the kind of person a 3-year-old would be proud of.